live in a world of sin. And the consequences of that sin is this broken world that's full of evil and bad things. And sometimes we have bad things that happen to us. Sometimes bad things happen because the enemy, the devil, is trying to get us off of this path and this relationship with Jesus. And James even says this in the book of James. He says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." So bad things happen. They bring it up in the Bible. They talk about it. The life of a Christian isn't easy, and bad things are going to happen no matter what. So without jumping too deep into the question, why do bad things happen? Without going too deep into that, we're going to look at how we can rework that question, how we can use our words intentionally with this question. And before we can really get to that, I think that we need to look at somebody's story in the Bible, somebody that had something bad happen to them. So this person's story is a guy named Daniel. And so Daniel actually gets his own book in the Bible. And so we are going to flip our Bibles open to Daniel chapter 6. We're going to be reading from there. So I'm going to give you guys a minute. Flip, flip, flip. If you find the page number, call it out. Help your friends around you. Just Daniel chapter 6. We're going to read the whole thing. We're going to break it up a little bit, but we're going to read the whole thing tonight. Still seeing some flipping. I believe 522 is the page I heard somebody call out. 526? So I'm getting different. There's different Bibles out here. Never mind. Chapter 6. It's the front page of my Internet Explorer browser up here. Just BibleGateway.com. Yep. All right. We're going to start reading. So, it pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them. So, Darius is the king at this time, one of whom was Daniel. Daniel's who we're going to focus in on the story. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find ground for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. So Daniel is in charge of these 120 satraps, and they don't like him because Darius is about to make him over all the kingdom. They don't want that. And so they're like, we got to find something wrong with him. They can't find anything wrong. He's doing everything perfect. He's running a tight ship. He's not corrupt. He's good. But goes on to say this. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any bias for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God." So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, "May King Darius live forever." The royal administrators, prefects and satraps, advisors and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except for you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now your majesty issued the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed. So King Darius put the decree in writing. So Daniel worships God. And so these guys go all the way to the king, and they make him put this decree over the entire land that you're not allowed to pray to anybody except for King Darius for 30 days. And so this is what Daniel does. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. These men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except you, your majesty, will be thrown into the lion's den? The king answered, the decree stands, in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed. Then they said to the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and make every effort until sundown to save him. When the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, remember, your majesty, that according to the law, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, may your God whom you serve continually rescue you. So, I think it's safe to say that a bad thing happened to a good person. Right? Daniel is this guy who's a good government official. He's not corrupt. He worships God. He prays to God. If you go back and read the other chapters of Daniel, you see that he worships God faithfully. He's a good person. He follows God. He does what he's supposed to. He has a relationship with God. And here, he's being punished essentially for worshiping God. A bad thing is happening to him. He served God, even knew that it could bring death upon him. And so, some people sit here and they ask, why would God do this to Daniel? Why would God let these people throw him in this lion's den? Why does God let these bad things happen to him? Well, you see, the matter of the fact is God didn't let that actually happen. You see, the pride, the jealousy, and the sins of those that are around Daniel caused that to happen. They wanted what Daniel had. They wanted his power. They wanted what he was going to have. They didn't want him there. They envied that. And so they did whatever they could to get him out of the way. And through that sin, they caused this bad thing to happen to Daniel. And so, I'm sure a lot of you guys know this already. Some of you guys might not. But the story doesn't end there. So we're going to keep on reading. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. So then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him. And he could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. And when he came near to the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions? Daniel answered, may the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty. The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him because he had trusted in his God. And at the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. So Daniel's story didn't end with being thrown in the lion's den, right? It didn't end with this bad thing happening. It wasn't over yet. Yeah, Daniel suffered something bad that happened to him. I'm sure I'd be frightened in a lion's den. But God sent an angel to hold shut the mouth of the lion. But do you guys think that it was over right then in that moment when an angel came down and just held the mouth shut of the lion? Like, even though this lion's mouth was shut, I'd still be pretty scared of a lion, right? It's still there. It's still a frightening situation because Daniel didn't know what was going to happen next. He didn't know that in the morning he was going to be let free. He didn't know that he wasn't going to be starved to death down there. But what Daniel didn't do was he didn't let his fear get in the way. He still had trust in God, even through the bad things. Now, Daniel made it out. He made it to the other side. God was working in Daniel's life even through this bad situation. Like, I think everyone can relate to this. Like, the last year and a half, 2 years have been rough, right? I've struggled so much in the last year and a half, and it is so easy to focus on the bad things. It is so easy to get distracted by what's not going right, by what situation you've been put in, by what you've lost, by what you don't have. Like, I have lost so much community in the last year and a half of people that I surrounded myself with. And I was focusing on that a lot, and I didn't realize that God had put a different community around me. When we ask the question, why does God let bad things happen to me? We overlook the other things that are happening in our lives. We're focusing on the wrong thing. Instead, what we should be asking is, what is God doing for me when I face hard times? When I'm in this situation, how is God working? How is God providing for me through these troubled times? In the face of death, God provided Daniel with an angel to hold the lion's mouth shut. In the face of betrayal, God provided Daniel with an ally in the king who took him out of the pit. It's not always something you're going to see in the moment, the good things that are happening through the bad. You're not always going to see how God's working through these situations. Not in the moment, maybe not in a week, maybe not in a month, maybe not in a year. But God is working through these times. And you don't know what else God is protecting you from. Maybe something really, really bad has happened, but maybe that happened so that something worse didn't happen. I struggle with this a lot. A lot of the times, like I said, I tend to focus on the negative. I tend to focus on the bad things. I tend to focus on what's not going right. And it's that mind shift that changed the words. Why does God let bad things happen to me? To what is God doing for me through the bad? Like, it's that switch from negativity to positivity. How am I going to grow through this? How am I going to grow closer to Jesus through this? What is building that relationship with him look like through this? One of the things that I've done in the past that I've started doing again recently is I journal. So every night before I go to bed, I write down all of my prayers for the day. I write them out, whether it's in a bullet point with just small words, or if I write the whole thing out. I write those down. I write down the goods, the bads, everything that's happening in my life. And I date it, whatever the date is. I do it for weeks. I do it for months. They are awesome, awesome tools to come back and look at. Because I can tell you from doing it for a while is that I did this for a year straight the first time I did it. And when I went back and looked at my first journal, I saw that I had been praying for this one thing for so long. And it eventually kind of trailed off. And I didn't really think that God had answered my prayer in that moment. So I stopped praying about it. But in reality, when I looked back on it a year later, God did answer that question, just not in the way that I thought he was going to. He took me through that bad situation, but it wasn't the answer that I wanted to see. It's not always how we want to see it. So I encourage you guys, get a journal down, write down your prayers, write down the tough things that you're dealing with. Write down how you think God is handling them. And I promise you look back at them in a week, in a year, in a month, you're going to see how God has been working through your lives. So that's my challenge for you guys this week. Instead of asking, why does God let bad things happen? Look around and ask, what all has God done for me through the bad times? What has God protected me from that I didn't see? And what good has God brought that I've overlooked? Let's pray. Dear Lord, I just thank you. I thank you for each and every one of these students, each and every one of these leaders. I thank you for just being able to come together in this room to learn about you, to come together as a church, as a community. I pray that if any of these students are dealing with something, they're struggling, if they're hurting, that they would just, one, feel comfortable enough to go talk to a leader about it, and two, that they would just know that you are there with them, God, that you are there with them through the pain, through the hurt, through the suffering, and you're doing so much more than they ever know. In your name, amen.